game is on. The stakes are high, but the action isn't just on the field.
He's rearranging that ring. Get it inside!
SportsGrid's in-game live. Your ultimate second screen experience.
A little flyer, couple of
18.5 point live line.
Every prop, every play, every day.
Anything can happen. That's complete chaos.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun. I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity. I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this once? Oh, Donnie, you've got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Good morning. Welcome to NewsWire here on SportsGrid, the day after the madness as we get ready for the Sweet 16 and, of course, opening day in Major League Baseball here on SportsGrid. Great to be back with you. We'll break down all the games in college hoops. Gilbert McGregor will join us courtesy of Sporting News, so stay on the grid for that. In addition, of course, we'll break down the latest in the National Football League. We've got some free agency to hit on. And naturally, a lot of very close games yesterday in college basketball. I don't know about the first couple of days of the NCAA tournament, to be honest with you. A lot of chalky wins, as they say, as a lot of the number one seeds and number two seeds ended up moving on. But the four conferences to reach the Sweet 16, they are all set. It's the ACC, Big 10, Big 12, and ACC. It's the first time there's been fewer than 7 leagues in the Sweet 16. And very top-heavy, needless to say. But UConn is no longer a champ at this point. I guess you could say that until you beat the champs, they're still the champs. Well, that's the end. Third straight bid for them winning a college basketball championship comes to an end, courtesy of the Florida Gators. Very close game, by the way. In the end, 77-75. Walter Clayton Jr. had some huge buckets down the stretch. 13 of his 23 points in the final 8 minutes on Sunday. UConn did make a 3 at the buzzer beater. That's why the game was 2 points, but it was not that close. Although it was close throughout the game, UConn did lead for a large portion of it. But the legacy comes to an end, at least for the time being, of this team that captured back-to-back championships. Here's Dan Hurley after the game talking about how much it meant to get this far.
Just the historic run that these guys have been on, and the guys that have worn the uniform last couple of years. If it's going to come to an end for us, I wouldn't have wanted it to be in a game where we lost to a lower seed, and there's some honor, I guess, in the way that this went down. But it's a tough loss. We played, I think, in a manner that gave us a real chance to win. And, credit Clayton. I mean, he made some NBA level threes off the dribble, to beat us. And, it took that for somebody to put us down, in this tournament after winning, obviously, a bunch in a row here. But
Duke advances as well to the Sweet 16. Relatively easy games for them this weekend. 89-66, they beat Baylor. Tyrese Proctor had 7 3-pointers. He had 25 points in this one. Cooper Flagg was fantastic. 18 points, 9 rebounds, and 6 assists. Michigan State had issues with Richard Pitino and New Mexico, but they come out on top, 71-63 the final. Tom Izzo, 58 wins in the NCAA tournament. And also Alabama beat St. Mary's 80-66. They have reached the Sweet 16 for a third straight season. All right, Oregon and Arizona was the late game last night. In case you missed it, Oregon was up big in this one, 19-4. They couldn't hold that lead late as Arizona picks up the victory, 87-83, and they move on to the Sweet 16. Only one of those teams naturally out west could advance. Tommy Lloyd, head coach of Arizona, is glad that it was them.
That was fun tonight. I mean, we had a lot of fun, and I'm giving credit to a lot of these guys here. I mean, we've really been talking about just, kind of developing, I don't want to say unemotional, but a real steady approach, 0-0 score, so what, now what type mentality. And these guys, executed it to perfection today. To go down 14 or whatever we did early and then not panic and just realize how much time was left in the game and just to literally take a lead by halftime. That says something about this group. So
it's a big matchup because it's the next game. It's the only game that matters. Obviously, we got our mind was focused on Oregon, and we got it done. And now, we're gonna get in the film room and lock in on Duke and what they do. Obviously, they're a great team. They're well coached, and we'll be ready for them when the time comes.
We were waiting for a buzzer beater all weekend long. We finally got one on Sunday night. Maryland advances to the Sweet 16 in a wild game against Colorado State. Back and forth they went down the stretch. But in the end, it was a freshman, Derek Queen. He hits the buzzer beater as the Terps end up moving on and hit that game at the buzzer. And that was basically the only buzzer beater all weekend long in March Madness. Go figure that. Here's Kevin Willard after the game and also Derek Queen on the big shot.
Yeah, extremely proud of this group of guys for battling through. Colorado State is really good. Nico does an unbelievable job, and I thought it was a great game. Julian Reese, who gets 1,000 rebounds in this game, comes up probably with the biggest rebound of his career, and then makes his free throws. So give Colorado State a lot of credit. They're an excellent basketball team. I feel bad that they had to go that way, but I really felt like maybe we were due eventually for one of those to go for us.
First, that was my first game winner, and when Coach drew up the play, my teammates trusted me, and he trusted me. I was a little bit nervous, but I knew we was due for one, and I had to make this.
I think right now, at this point, it's fair to say that Ole Miss is on a roll. 5.5-point underdogs. They beat Iowa State. No problem in this one. 91-78. Sean Padula had 20 points, so the SEC gets a big win there. Speaking of the SEC, Kentucky had no issues at all this weekend. This time they beat Illinois 84-75 yesterday. They will face Tennessee on Friday night. Speaking of the Southeastern Conference, Auburn is moving on. They end up beating Creighton by a final score of 82-70. They took the lead with 14 minutes to go and never gave it back. A lot of veteran leadership on this team and a lot of seniors, but Bruce Pearl, the head coach of the Auburn Tigers, after the game discussed how his seniors essentially, yes, they have played several years at Auburn, but none of them have been in this big spot.
Well, I think it's always an advantage when you have older guys, but my older guys haven't been here before. Creighton's been in the Sweet 16 4 out of the last 5 years. Those guys on that team have been in the Sweet 16 for 3 or 4 of the last 5 years. I don't have anybody on our team. And one of the best performers in the second half was a freshman. So some of that experience thing, it's important, but it wasn't the factor tonight.
I think right now that Auburn is one of those teams you got to really look out for as they were going into the tournament. The other one is, of course, Arkansas. They move on and they beat Luke's St. John's 75-66. The teams combined to make 4 3-pointers on 41 attempts, with St. John's shooting 28% from the floor. But Coach Cal has been there before with Kentucky, and here he is after the game talking about heading to the Sweet 16 with Arkansas.
Oh, they're fun to coach. I mean, I told them this is as rewarding a year as I've had based on the fact of how far we've come. and that these kids believed in each other. Told them many times, you're never going to disappoint me. Just go play. We'll figure stuff out. And, Z was good today. We need Z to play. I need him on the floor some. Jonas, 2 fouls. I just saw we went 2 for 19 from the 3 and 1. What in the world? I mean, then I saw they were 2 for 22. Was it an ugly game? Or was it a game that was exciting? Like both, an ugly, exciting game. I don't care. It could be an ugly, ugly game, and I'm happy. We're moving on.
Yeah, Razorbacks not expected to get this far in the tournament, that's for sure. Tennessee was, and they get their third straight Sweet 16. They beat UCLA 67-58 last night. Chaz Lanier, 4 more threes. He has Tennessee's record this in a season with 120. How about Michigan with a big comeback and a surge? They put up 91 against Texas A&M, 91-79 the final. BYU gets a stop at the buzzer. They beat Wisconsin 91-89. Darian Williams, 28 points. Texas Tech is moving on. They take out Drake. And Purdue is returning to the Sweet 16 as they beat McNeese by a final of 76-62. We will take a quick timeout here on NewsWire. We come back next. We'll recap the results of the NCAA tournament with Gilbert McGregor of Sporting News. Don't go away.
That magical time of the year when everyone suddenly becomes a basketball expert. Highlight watching, mascot picking, bracket stressing. Sound familiar? Skip the guesswork with Bracket Central. Real expert picks, trusted analysis, and zero stress. Because choosing teams by mascot cuteness isn't exactly a winning strategy. Only on SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take.
Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity. I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this once? Oh, Donnie, you've got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
It's made every match so much more enjoyable to watch because you don't get the stinkers, right?
Right. It goes back to these guys being smart. They figured out that if I've got the hammer in my back pocket and I don't relinquish it, we can just play them straight up and win. They figured that out. So it's like, all right, now credit to the people at TGL. Like, no, we need to fix this because the hammer can change the match. And since we fixed it, you're not out of it.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire. The number 1 seeds are all alive and well in the NCAA tournament. So those of you who are participating in the fun brackets, probably your bracket's not busted, I would guess at this point. You took the Gators, you took Duke or Auburn or Houston. But will that continue into the Sweet 16? Let's bring in Gilbert McGregor from Sporting News. Gilbert, great to have you back here on NewsWire. And, I think the theme of the NCAA tournament, with the exception of Maryland and Florida and that game against UConn, is generally speaking, got to keep it real here. Not a lot of close games, especially Thursday and Friday. It was basically like you turn a game on, it's close for about 5 minutes, and most of the teams ended up covering the spread. So Auburn beats Creighton 82-70. Houston beats Gonzaga 81-76. Yes, a close game, kind of right on the number where it was. But I would ask you, did either Auburn or Houston impress you to the point that you think that they can continue to make a run toward the Final Four? We'll start with them.
You know what? Houston more so than Auburn. Auburn was tested a little bit during the tournament in the first weekend, and it showed a few flaws. They closed the season out losing, I think, 3 of their last 4 games. And obviously they play in a tough SEC, which there's no night off, and you're going to lose games, especially as a team like that. But I was a little surprised that they were the number 1 overall seed still after not winning their conference tournament. So I think they showed some flaws. Can they work through those things? They're dealing with some injury woes as well. So will Chad Baker-Mazar stay on the floor? Dealt with some cramping issues down the stretch in those games as well. So if there's foul trouble, if there's injuries, I think they could be a little vulnerable. I'm really impressed with Houston. They have a style. They stick to it. They are very physical. They play defensively, and they make plays. So I'm not so concerned about Houston. They were tested. I think that will help them in the long run, but I got my eye on Auburn.
Yeah, Auburn too. Okay, so now the games, of course, yesterday, a little bit different for one team, my team, the Florida Gators. Boy, UConn gave them a battle, and if Walter Clayton Jr. is not on Florida, I don't know that they win that game, but I guess that's the bottom line, Gilbert, is that he is. And so even if they don't cover spreads the next couple of games, the Gators are formidable, and Duke basically hasn't played a competitive game in the NCAA tournament. So, Duke's moved ahead very significantly here as favorites to win the NCAA tournament championship. The Gators have fallen back a little bit to plus 390, and I guess it's based off that one game. But I would ask you, should we overreact to that one game? I know they got a tough matchup coming up against Maryland, but, Maryland themselves didn't look all that great for the majority of that game.
I think what we've learned in years past is it's important to not overreact to games like this. It happens. It's the best. You got to win 6 games and it's one and done. So a lot of times you're tested. All that matters is that you survive in advance. I think back to Virginia a couple years ago, needed a miracle shot to force overtime and ended up winning the tournament after getting that. Walter Clayton, if Florida doesn't have him, they probably don't advance, but they have him and no other team does. I think when you have him on your roster, you're able to survive through a scare like they did yesterday. That builds a lot, gives you confidence moving forward in the tournament, and I think that will help them in the long run. I wouldn't be surprised if they're confident enough to kind of cruise in their next game or so. I was high on Florida coming into the tournament. I still feel the same way, but I do understand also Duke has been so dominant. It doesn't look like there's any team out there that's capable of making it hard on them. So I kind of understand that it's probably more credit to Duke than discredit to what Florida did.
All right, now let's move on to the game last night. Arizona beats Oregon despite the Ducks going up early in this game. Arizona storms back. This kid Love is fantastic for the Wildcats. When he is hot, he's unstoppable. When he's not, I think Arizona loses. So I guess that's kind of where I would go with this, Gilbert, is that I'm not saying that the Wildcats are a one-man show, but it does feel like if Love does not perform in any of the next 2 matchups that they have, I don't think Arizona's a candidate to move on.
Absolutely. They go as Caleb Love goes. And it felt good last night watching 2 old Pac-12 foes going at it in Seattle, a game that ended past midnight. All was right with the world. But think about Caleb Love. He's going to be motivated. They're going to line up against Duke. He has success against Duke during his time at Carolina, even a game at Arizona. But we're all going to think about what he did in that Final Four game against Duke a few years ago. So if he can tap into that, then it'll be good for them. But Duke is as familiar with him as he is with Duke, and I'm sure that John Shire will have a game plan to try to slow down Caleb Love. And again, we talk about how talented this Duke team is. It's going to be a really tough task for Caleb Love and the Wildcats.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, so Michigan State, they beat New Mexico. It seems like the Spartans were kind of flying under the radar a little bit this weekend. Some odd times for their games. And they really, they were really never in jeopardy at all of losing. Let's give credit to New Mexico where it's due. No one had them not only getting to the NCAA tournament, but also winning a game. And they actually kept this game close for the majority of it. But I still feel like Michigan State with Izzo there, he's going to game plan. Gilbert, I don't want to get in the way of Michigan State with them having 4 days to prepare for the next game.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing, as you pointed out. Having 4 days to prepare, this is a team, again, similar to what I said with Houston, has a style. They don't shoot the ball very well, but they defend pretty well, and they're also really connected as a group. And I think that helps a lot, especially in March. So having that time to prepare, having a coach who's done it before, has been around for a really, really long time, is definitely going to work in Michigan State's favor. I understand, especially after this layoff, to favor Sparty.
All right, so let's run down the final other results here, and you can pick whichever one that sticks out to you. So Mississippi, huge surprise, them getting this far. SEC proving their worth here. They beat Iowa State 91-78. The buzzer beater for Maryland yesterday, overcoming a lot in that one to take out Colorado State 72-71. Kentucky has really not been challenged, surprisingly, in the NCAA tournament thus far. They beat Illinois 84-75. And boy, Alabama, they didn't put up the point that they normally do. And St. Mary's is a big reason for that because of the offense that they play. But their point guard on Alabama is incredible. Like, I just feel if he's pushing the floor, I saw him going left and going right. I mean, it's just kind of, one of those game-changing type players. But I feel like the Crimson Tide definitely will moving forward.
Absolutely. And we can talk about Alabama because 80 points is not usually what they score, but St. Mary's very rarely gives up that much. So looking forward ahead to later in the week, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later in the week. This Alabama-BYU game is going to be really, really fun. Two awesome offenses. BYU with a thrilling win over the weekend as well. It's going to be exciting to watch those two teams go head-to-head. So seeing Alabama, Mark Sears, you talked about, Nate Oates, again, has this team playing for a lot in the Sweet 16 this year. So really excited about what Alabama's going to do, especially against BYU moving forward. Going to be a high-octane game this week.
Should be a great matchup this week coming up Thursday through Sunday. Again, Gilbert, we'll lock back in as we get closer to it. Thanks again for coming on NewsWire.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
All right. NFL draft coming up. Free agency still out there in the NFL. Our SportsGrid insider, Adam Caplan, will join us next. Don't go away.
That magical time of the year when everyone suddenly becomes a basketball expert. Highlight watching, mascot picking, bracket stressing. Sound familiar? Skip the guesswork with Bracket Central. Real expert picks, trusted analysis, and zero stress. Because choosing teams by mascot cuteness isn't exactly a winning strategy. Only on SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity. I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this once? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
It's made every match so much more enjoyable to watch because you don't get the stinkers, right?
Right. It goes back to these guys being smart. They figured out that if I've got the hammer in my back pocket and I don't relinquish it, we can just play them straight up and win. They figured that out. So it's like, all right, now credit to the people at TGL. Like, no, we need to fix this because the hammer can change the match. And since we fixed it, you're not out of it.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. NFL free agency is, trickling to the end here. But, very soon, honestly, we're going to be focused on the upcoming NFL draft. And let's bring in Adam Caplan, our SportsGrid insider, who will be more prominent with us as I would assume starting next week once we hit the month of April and then charge toward this thing. And Adam, great to have you back here on NewsWire as well. We've got a couple of big names at quarterback still out there, unsurprisingly, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, not really sure how that's going to go. And then we're going to turn our attention naturally to some of these really big names at quarterback as we get closer and closer. Thanks for coming back on.
Yeah, good to talk to you, Craig. So it's funny. You and I have talked about this for a while now. We can actually look into it. So you made the point, which is very fair, that look, you might say there are two quarterbacks who should only go in the first round and maybe two or three who go in the second, but quarterbacks get pushed up. And right when you think only two or three are going to go in the first round, 5 go in there. And I got your point. I got your point. So we're going to break these down in tiers. And for the people who put money on this stuff, you could take this to the bank. Cam Ward is by far the best quarterback for this draft. I've been saying this since January. He'll be the first quarterback to go off the board. As early as to the Titans at number 1. Now, after that is the question. I know that the early money is on Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado to be the second quarterback. I would agree with that. It's not a lock like Cam Ward is to be the first quarterback off the board. He should be. Now, talking to people around the league, tape is good, not elite, not great. Cam Ward's is really, really good. So if you're looking at my tier 2, we've got Cam Ward number 1.
Mm-hmm.
He is the tier 1. Tier 2 is Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado. Now, the next guy I'm going to talk about, I felt after getting back from the Senior Bowl that Jackson Dart would be this year's Bo Nix. Bo Nix was thought to be a third-round pick heading into the Senior Bowl last year. He had a great Senior Bowl week and had a terrific offseason. And Jackson Dart, Craig, is that guy. He absolutely could go in the first round. I know the rumors about top 10. I don't see that at all. We'll talk more about that going forward. But so in my tier 2, we've got Sanders and Dart. Now, tier 3. These are guys who should go in the second or third round. Jalen Milroe is a very interesting player, really strong arm, nice size. You worry about the accuracy, the process, and getting rid of the football in time. That's a problem. That's certainly an issue, but there's talent there to develop. Out of Alabama is Jalen Milroe, who should go second round. Now, Quinn Ewers is the next guy. Now, I know this has been controversial. Who is Quinn Ewers? He did not have a good season last year. Now, the reason is because he played with a very bad injury. He strained his side, okay? He strained his oblique. And Craig, if you're a baseball pitcher, you're down 2 to 3 months with that injury if you severely strain it. He had a pretty significant strain, I'm told. So he just didn't look like himself. So he's good to go. It's all good now. He threw the ball well at the combine. He's the next quarterback. And it wouldn't surprise me if Ewers continues to do well in his private workouts for clubs that he goes ahead of Milroe. Then tier 4, my final tier. This is a guy that more people are going to be talking about as we get closer. He's a little bit older. Tyler Schau out of Louisville turns 26, Craig, in September. But he's a quarterback, okay? He's a quarterback. Let's not forget that. Will Howard out of Ohio State, Riley Leonard out of Notre Dame, and Kyle McCord, a lot of people like later on. That's my tier 4. But every year, folks, quarterbacks emerge that you're like, wow, I didn't see that guy going early. Right. When Mitch Trubisky went in the top 10, I always tell people any quarterback could get pushed up on the board.
Right. So if FanDuel, Adam, sets that line at 3.5 on quarterbacks in the first round, you got to pound the over, right? You got to do it. You can't think
3
otherwise.
For sure. We're going to talk about this week by week. I would say yes, but man, I mean, I think you're really reaching to say one of those other quarterbacks will go in the first round. But again, when you don't have one, you're looking for one. Mark Sanchez is not a very gifted quarterback. He's another guy should not have gone in the first round, and he does. Mitch Trubisky won 2 overall. I was at that draft in Philly in 2017. I had this report to come out about a month before the draft. It'll go in the top 10. I was shocked though. But you never know what's on someone's draft board. But the feeling around the league is it's obviously a lock for 2, probably going to get 3. On the over for 3.5. I don't have that one right now, man. I'm not there yet.
100%. 100%. I'm on it. A minute to go, Adam. Why is everyone so excited about Jameis Winston? Are these just people who play fantasy football? Do they not watch the actual games? Like, I love Jameis Winston. He's a great guy and a character, but come on.
It has nothing to do with Aaron Rodgers, trust me. He's just a backup quarterback at this point of his career. They want Aaron Rodgers. They're not going to get him most likely. He's probably going to go to Pittsburgh. But no, they're going to be in the quarterback market still and also in the draft. They're not done. They've got a lot of work to do, the Giants do at quarterback.
All right. Great stuff, Adam. We'll catch up again next week. Thanks again.
Sounds good. Thank you.
That magical time of the year when everyone suddenly becomes a basketball expert. Highlight watching, mascot picking, bracket stressing. Sound familiar? Skip the guesswork with Bracket Central. Real expert picks, trusted analysis, and zero stress. Because choosing teams by mascot cuteness isn't exactly a winning strategy. Only on SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun. I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity. I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this once? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
It's made every match so much more enjoyable to watch because you don't get the stinkers, right?
Right. It goes back to these guys being smart. They figured out that if I've got the hammer in my back pocket and I don't relinquish it, we can just play them straight up and win. They figured that out. So it's like, all right, now credit to the people at TGL. Like, no, we need to fix this because the hammer can change the match. And since we fixed it, you're not out of it.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Pat Evans is with us from Legal Sports Report. He's in a chipper mood today. His Spartans did get through round one and get through round two. So we know what Pat's appointment viewing is going to be on Friday. Pat, it's great to have you back here on NewsWire. It felt to me like they sort of flew under the radar a little bit this weekend. Like I think that Michigan State was one of a handful of teams that I really didn't see all that much of, some odd times, and I just didn't really ever feel that they were going to lose a game, although I guess give some credit to New Mexico. They hung tight for a bit.
New Mexico gave them a fit to start, and yeah, I think you're right. Late games, that was tough for me. You know, I'm getting up there in age now at this point, so I need my sleep, and they were playing late, and all you needed to see is that Tom Izzo reaction when he found out what time he was playing Sunday night when he put his hands in his head. So that was exactly my thought. But yeah, they were playing all right. You know, terrible game from Jace Richardson scoring wise. Their best player last night, and they still were able to pull out the win. So let's keep it going. That's what I'm going to say.
All right, so let's keep going with the topic of tax rates and sports betting. Such a scintillating topic for us. So Maryland thinking about cutting sports betting tax rates while everybody else is trying to raise them. What's going on here?
Well, sort of. So what happened was coming into this year, Maryland the session, Governor Wes Moore set out his budget proposal. You know, they've got a $6 billion deficit they need to figure out in Maryland, and so he figured one of the ways to do that was to hike sports betting taxes, double actually, 15 to 30%, and he also included a table games hike at actual casinos from 20 to 25%. And so far in, the legislative meetings as it's going through the legislature, because it has to be approved by, the General Assembly and the Senate, by April 7th, there was a meeting last week where an assembly committee said, you know what? No, that's too much. Going from 15 to 30%, that's a huge hike. Let's not do that. Let's go up to 20%. So it's not going from 15 to 30% at the moment. It's going from 15 to 20%. So not a big hike, not terrible. In that sense for the operators. The table games tax hike was eliminated, and so far from what it sounds like, online casino, which has been a topic of discussion in the legislature in Maryland the past 2 years, sounds like it's all but dead again. It might not even pass either chamber, which it did last year. It passed the assembly last year. So interesting kind of there, and a tax rate, and that's the second state now that we've seen legislators kind of whoa, this isn't okay from the governor. Ohio just recently also, Governor Mike DeWine proposed in his budget a jump from 20 to 40%. And though we haven't seen that actually get trimmed yet, lawmakers have come out and said, nope, we're not going to do that. That's aggressive. If you recall, Mike DeWine signed a budget in 2023 to double from 10% to 20%. So he's eager to get those tax rates up and get money, which in Ohio would go to stadium funds, which is kind of interesting. And yeah, there's a couple other states that have also recommended or talked about raising taxes, but they haven't gone super far. Similar things happening in New Jersey. Been told that's probably not going to go very far. So yeah, Maryland, there was a proposed doubling of the 15% tax rate, and now lawmakers are saying, let's keep it at 20, and we'll see. So there's a few more meetings that it has to go through. It could go back up to 30, but it seems like once you kind of trim it back, it's going to stay there.
All right, let's move on now to Nebraska with such little news opening up the doors for online sports betting across the country this year. Maybe we've got a state ready to legalize this thing online in 2026. Is Nebraska a possibility for that?
Nebraska certainly is a possibility. It's such an interesting state, first of all, because it's a unicameral legislature. So there's one chamber that it needs to get through. That's the Senate. And in 2020, voters in Nebraska approved casino gambling in Nebraska. So now we have 6 casinos in Nebraska open at former racetracks. And that included in-person sports betting based on what the legislator said. And now, so we're entering into this discussion since then. Those first opened up in 2023. And since then, the lawmakers have been kind of like, well, let's go online. Why not do online sports betting too? Last year, Governor Jim Pillen said, would be a great avenue to some money so we can help decrease the property tax burden on our residents. And there was a special session last fall. There was a bill that was in play. It didn't get very far in the special session just because it's, a very short session. You've got enough people against it that you didn't even want to tackle it. But then Pillen came out and said, let's do it as a priority bill next year. And we're seeing some movement. There's a big, long hearing last month where there was almost 100, if not over 100 opponents that came out to talk or submit letters against expanding sports betting online. Regardless of that, last week it advanced to the Senate floor. We'll see if that makes any sort of movement on the actual floor. It will need to pass 3 votes where you need to have at least 2/3 of the legislator voting in favor of it. So that's one major hurdle. 3 votes of that is pretty significant, especially when you had that much opposition during the hearing. And then if it does achieve that, then it will have to go to the ballot in 2026, where voters, again, would have to approve it. But again, voters in Nebraska approved casino gambling in 2020, so that seems like it might be okay for the industry there. It might not fully get over the hump this year, but that's okay because, it can carry over into next year. And if the public vote isn't until 2026, you don't really need to. So there's not a major rush in Nebraska, but that is another positive step for the industry, which, to your point, has not had a lot of exciting news in terms of new markets, whether it's online sports betting in general, or online casino. It's all been kind of flat news for the industry, especially when you then get to the smaller items like tax hikes.
Finally, let's get to New York. Senator Joe Addabbo is at it again. This time, looks like he's got an issue with sweepstakes, which I know a lot of different states do. Addabbo, Pat, in the column I read at Legal Sports Report, simply put, seems to be saying we are not going to be able to regulate something that won't allow us to be regulated. I mean, I the way I read it is that you got to pay us to be involved, but you can tell me what the real story is here.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a good argument he kind of sort of made. To Legal Sports Report earlier this year, he also said, you know what? This is an unregulated form of gambling in the way I look at it. If we're going to have gambling, it needs to be regulated, and so it's safe for the consumers. And that's his major stance. And you're seeing, and it did pass his Senate committee last week, so we'll see that continue to move forward. We're seeing more and more states at least take up prohibition bills on these sweepstakes operators. I think we're up to 8. A source has told me that there's probably at least 2 more coming. And you're seeing it in some states at least pass. I mean, there was a sweepstakes bill in Maryland that passed the Senate 47-0. There's a hearing on that bill in the House today. So, the legislators seemingly think that this is an issue at some level of, there is gambling components to it, and they want it to either be regulated or they want to prohibit it, and just like online casino or the like. So it's a very interesting situation that is now getting lots of attention from legislators and then also regulators. Regulators are now starting to send cease and desist letters to these operators in the same way they are with the offshore sports books and online casinos. So, will it pass any of these legislators fully in New York specifically as it passed that Senate committee? We'll see. But yeah, it's definitely gaining more and more attention. I think the New York Times, I know, I was just reading it. The New York Times put out a pretty big explainer about the sweepstakes industry and what's happening. So yeah, it's getting national attention as well. So yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. That's for sure.
All right, Pat, great to have you back here on NewsWire. And will we talk later in the week before your big game? Or
I believe I'm on Wednesday. I'll bring a whole scouting report just for you, Craig.
Okay, we'll preview Michigan State's next matchup with Pat Evans. All right, coming up next, it was one of the bigger upsets of the NCAA tournament. Arkansas defeating St. John's. Coach Young will be with us next and talk about what the future holds for the Razorbacks. And we'll also get into the upstart Michigan Wolverines, who put up a 91 spot in the tournament. Don't go away.
That magical time of the year when everyone suddenly becomes a basketball expert. Highlight watching, mascot picking, bracket stressing. Sound familiar? Skip the guesswork with Bracket Central. Real expert picks, trusted analysis, and zero stress. Because choosing teams by mascot cuteness isn't exactly a winning strategy. Only on SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching!
Why?
Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this once? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
It's made every match so much more enjoyable to watch because you don't get the stinkers, right?
Right. It goes back to these guys being smart. They figured out that if I've got the hammer in my back pocket and I don't relinquish it, we can just play them straight up and win. They figured that out. So it's like, all right, now credit to the people at TGL. Like, no, we need to fix this because the hammer can change the match. And since we fixed it, you're not out of it.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Coach Young's ready to take his breather here for a day or two before the next round of the NCAA tournament. But we're not going to give him one this morning. We got to recap everything that happened yesterday. Coach, great to be with you here. Thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. We got a lot to cover, so no chit-chat. Let's get started. Arkansas, one of the bigger upsets of the NCAA tournament. They're moving on. They beat the number 2 seed, St. John's, 75-66. A lot of discussion about Coach Pitino in this one. There's like a lot of different storylines here, like positive, Calipari, Arkansas, fantastic season. Also positive, St. John's, incredible regular season, winning one game in the NCAA tournament. but Coach Petito's just getting crushed here. Like, I mean, I understand it. You're supposed to win that game against Arkansas, but that's what we do. I guess we just focus on the negative here. I think both teams had great years no matter what happens moving forward.
Well, for an Arkansas team, people got to remember, Craig, great to be on with you always. This team was a top 15 team, top 20 team preseason. So Arkansas had a tough regular season. They played better down the stretch. Obviously, new complete team, new staff with Cal. Kenny Payne, obviously, on the staff as well. So they had to kind of get their bearings. As for St. John's, listen, I think we probably saw that this was coming. Maybe if you really dig deeper, the fact that the round of 64 game versus Omaha, they only out-rebounded them by 2. They just had problems securing the rebound and playing against a bigger team. Now, the big issue that people are having is R.J. Lewis. And I have a completely different take as someone who coached the game and has been through the situation. The kid is 3 for 17. The last 3 shots could have been the 3 worst shots I've ever seen as a coach. You take Zuby Ejiofor, who is your, maybe not your leader, but a junior, basically trying to shake R.J. Lewis about, hey, calm down, we need you. R.J. gives him a blank stare. And then there was the other side of the ball where R.J. Lewis was lost defensively. At that point, you got to cut the bays of coach. It doesn't matter about what you've done all year. It's what you need right now. R.J. Lewis wasn't delivering that for Rick Pitino. It was best to get his you-know-what on the bench. Now, I think people are like, well, you could have put him back in. The one thing we don't know, and I'm going to say this, if he went to the bench and he calmed himself down, an assistant's going to go to Rick and say, Coach, he's good. We can put him back in. What that tells me is he wasn't good. And if you look at his face, even on the bench till the end of the game, he was absolutely out of it. The kid pressed. He had a bad game. And at the end of the day, the big argument to me for Rick is, why did you go inside to Zuby Ejiofor, who was your best player? You should have got him the ball a lot more down the stretch.
All right. Well, I'm going to give credit to the Razorbacks, man. I thought they played a very, very ugly game that worked for them. And you're right. I watched that game against Omaha, too. It was not smooth for St. John's in that first half. All right. So Arkansas will move on. I have a feeling, looking at this, most people are just going to take these points, these 5.5 against Texas Tech coming up on Thursday, total 147.5, not understanding just how well Texas Tech is playing too. But Coach, like Arkansas is not going to win the championship. They're going to have one of those games like they did in the regular season where they're going to fall completely flat. But it kind of happened last game, and they still won. Do they have some magic to keep this going?
We'll see. Texas Tech, if you look at it, Craig, going into the tournament, Texas Tech had better odds to make the Final Four than St. John's did. So people are respecting what Coach McCafflin has done over there at Texas Tech in short order. I think Texas Tech is extremely dangerous. And if you look at that bracket, you even look at what happened with Florida and how dangerous UConn was, Texas Tech is a popular team right now that could make a Final Four. I know Cal's done a good job, but to me, I'm going to go with the team that's been more consistent for the entire year, and it can deal with the defense and the toughness battle. I like Texas Tech to beat Arkansas and cover the spread.
Well, it's been happening throughout, a lot of covering. All right, Michigan somehow put 91 up on the board against Texas A&M. I did not see that coming, especially watching the first few minutes of this game. They'll take on Auburn. Auburn 7.5-point favorites. Michigan with that great late run in the conference tournament and has looked the part in the NCAA tournament. Is this too big a line with Auburn being favored by 7.5, or is basically it's not Cinderella story. They're a 5 seed. Anything can happen. But do you think that time runs out on the Wolverines this week?
Well, it's let's be honest. Which Auburn team are we getting? Are we getting the team before the one that lost 3 out of 4 games? And at times was basically in a tie game with Creighton with about 5-6 minutes left to go. If we're getting that team, you look at a team with in Michigan with Golden and Danny Wolf. Danny Wolf, the transfer from Yale, that's basically now a lottery pick. This is a dangerous team. And Auburn's been playing with fire. They almost got burned, but obviously Creighton ran out of gas. I think Michigan has more athletes to deal with them. I think the size inside with the 2 bigs is going to be different than just having Ryan Kalkbrenner at 7-1. I think Golden can affect some game. I think Danny Wolf's the difference. I'm not saying they win, but I'm going to take the points. Give me Michigan plus 7.5.
All right, 7.5 is the spread there. All right, Coach, before we let you go, in terms of like your overall thought of the NCAA tournament, right now Duke has been dominating, and they've moved up in terms of a favorite. The Gators have moved back, more or less everything the same. Teams have moved up a little bit in terms of odds because of St. John's being out of it as the 2 seed. Anything changed for you?
No, I liked Houston going into the tournament, and I like Houston still. I mean, you look at a Houston team that had no business playing Gonzaga as an 8 seed. It survived, but their ability to score, particularly L.J. Cryer, Emmanuel Sharp, Uzan, they got guys that can fill it up. And then obviously Juwan Roberts is back with the ankle injury. This is a team that we've been saying for years, when is Kelvin Sampson getting over the hump? When is Kelvin Sampson getting over the hump? I think this is the time he gets over the hump.
All right, Coach Young with us here on NewsWire. And as you can see, the Duke Blue Devils still the favorite to win the NCAA championship. All right, Coach, enjoy the rest of your week. We'll catch up again. And I know that Bracket Central is upon us here again Thursday. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Craig. See you next week.
All right, Coach Young with us here on the show. We haven't talked any baseball here on the show. We got opening day coming up on Thursday. Mookie Betts of the Dodgers met with reporters, says that he's lost 25 pounds. He's been sick. He's been throwing up. His status very much in question now for even the start of opening day here in the U.S. So hoping for the best of health for Mookie Betts. Some sort of stomach issue going on. Have not determined whether or not he's going to be able to play. We'll have the latest in baseball and also where are they now? Florida Atlantic when we return next and wrap things up. Last Licks is on deck here on NewsWire. We'll be right back after these messages. Don't go away.
That magical time of the year when everyone suddenly becomes a basketball expert. Highlight watching, mascot picking, bracket stressing. Sound familiar? Skip the guesswork with Bracket Central. Real expert picks, trusted analysis, and zero stress. Because choosing teams by mascot cuteness isn't exactly a winning strategy. Only on SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun. I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity. I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
It's made every match so much more enjoyable to watch because you don't get the stinkers, right?
Right. It goes back to these guys being smart. They figured out that if I've got the hammer in my back pocket and I don't relinquish it, we can just play them straight up and win. They figured that out. And so it's like, all right, now credit to the people at TGL. Like, no, we need to fix this because the hammer can change the match. And since we fixed it, you're not out of it.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back to NewsWire. Opening day just a few days away in Major League Baseball. It'll all kick off in the late afternoon on Thursday. Didn't expect that. Thought we'd get an afternoon game, but it all begins, I believe, 4 o'clock Eastern on Thursday. We'll get to the latest in baseball and talk a lot about it the next couple of days. But now let's end the show with some last licks. All right, so you heard me mention Mookie Betts, his status in question for the beginning of the season. Here's the latest on left-handed pitcher Shane McClanahan, who, of course, missed last season. He'll miss his opening day start, going to begin the season on the injured list. He's got nerve irritation in his left triceps. Kevin Cash made the announcement he's the manager of the Rays, but they said that he avoided a major injury, which is really good news. For those of you who are not familiar, by the way, the Tampa Bay right now is basically that stadium, Steinbrenner Field, Legends Field. They are redoing the stadium right now to make it look like a home stadium for the Tampa Bay Rays as they get ready to open up their season. But there was some positive news there about McClanahan. For those of you who are getting ready, by the way, for the fantasy baseball season or even the betting season for baseball, keep in mind the next 72 hours is going to be crazy. A lot of players making the roster, not making the roster, but certainly Rays will be without McClanahan to at least start the season. Also announced yesterday that Gunnar Henderson, superstar on the Baltimore Orioles, placed on the injured list as well. Actually, I don't know if he was placed on the injured list. Going to miss some time. I think he was placed on the injured list, if I'm not mistaken. Expected to miss about a week or two of action. All right, you may remember the 2023 Final Four. Who predicted that Florida Atlantic University would be in that Final Four? One of the craziest March Madnesses of all time, honestly. Well, how about this? Did you know that the Owls produced 3 great players on that team? In fact, the top 3 scorers on FAU's 2023 Final Four team are all in the Sweet 16 this year on separate teams. John L. Davis is playing for Michigan. Vlad Golden, John L. Davis playing for Arkansas. Vlad Golden playing for Michigan. And Algia Martin is playing for the Florida Gators. So there you go. You get your little taste of some FAU basketball. I know all of you are super impressed with FAU. Boca Raton, right back in my backyard here, about 40 minutes from me. Needless to say, FAU not sniffing the NCAA tournament this season. Okay, so opening day is coming, and that means players are going to be making their major league debut for the very first time. Maybe they'll sell a patch like Paul Skeens for $1 million. But there is a player that we've actually talked about here on NewsWire before. Maybe it may have been, I don't know, Frank, what was it, a year ago? Maybe a long time ago. Max Muncy is the name of the Los Angeles Dodgers World Series champion, but he shares a name with another Max Muncy who is playing on the Athletics this season. And because of an injury to Zach Geloff, Muncy has made the A's, Sacramento, I guess, opening day roster. That's right. So get ready, folks. We got 2 Max Muncys this week, at least, as the Major League Baseball season commences. It's hard to keep up enough with these names of guys in Major League Baseball. 26-man rosters, 30 teams, playing every day. But by the way, this Muncy on the A's is supposed to be a pretty good prospect. So we'll see if he gets some good PT. And by the way, A's, one of those teams that we'll keep an eye on at the beginning of the season. All right, that will do it for our show today. Plenty more coverage of March Madness and, of course, Major League Baseball coming up for you on Thursday. And we're also closing in, by the way, on 2 big events here. And this is a great time of the year for sports. 2 big events, the Masters and the NFL draft. Like, these are like almost here, folks. Like, once we turn the clock to April, we're there. And then we got NBA playoffs and such. So anyway, recapping it all from the Valspar Open is going to be Smiley Coffin. He's coming up at 12. And then we got Scott Farrell coast to coast at 3 o'clock Eastern. I'm sure he has some opinions on the games coming up later in the week and also recapping the NCAA tournament games as well. That is coming up, folks, for you at 3 o'clock Eastern, followed by Game Time Decisions, in-game live game day, and then Sports Rage tonight with Gabe. So make sure you check that out as well. Also want to thank our guests here on the show. Thanks to Adam Caplan, our SportsGrid insider. Of course, thanks to Pat Evans from Legal Sports Report, Coach Young, and Gilbert McGregor. For those of you who are streaming our show, awesome job. If you're thinking about streaming it on another phone, iPad, or other platform, make sure you download the SportsGrid app. Just take out your phone, scan that QR code that you see right there on your screen. It is free for both iOS and Android. It is the SportsGrid app, which is, by the way, streaming right now 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to give you the latest news, notes, and information. And sometimes, by the way, picks against the spread. All right, as I mentioned, Smiley's coming up at noon. We'll be back here for our next show tomorrow here on SportsGrid. So hopefully we will check you out as we get closer to the Sweet 16 of the NCAA tournament. It was a really, really, I thought, great job by an entire crew here covering the tournament in Bracket Central this weekend, and we're going to do it all again this week. Got to give the guys and girls a breather, I think, for a day or 2 before the next round. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. I'll see you back here tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern. Thanks to Luke and Frank directing and producing the show. Have a great day.